She kissed me on the cheek and said, "You were the good one." That's the moment that loops in my head like a broken film reel. Her voice breaking, eyes glossy, cab door shutting behind her, taillights swallowed by traffic. I didn't chase her. I just stood there. If you've ever frozen at the worst possible second, when everything in you screamed, move, speak, do something, then maybe you understand the kind of paralysis I'm talking about. I didn't just lose her again. I let her go. But that's not where it began. Let me tell you how I got to that curb. My name's Brian. And if you've ever carried yourself like a ghost through your own life, if you've ever felt like you missed the one moment that could have changed everything, then you'll understand why this story still haunts me. It started 3 weeks ago, in Denver, at a conference I almost didn't attend. I'd avoided them for years. Too many awkward run-ins, too many polished smiles hiding knives. But this one, it was different. My name was on the registration list. I'd already booked the flight, and honestly, I needed something to jolt me out of whatever fog I'd been floating in. The hotel ballroom buzzed with energy, expensive coffee, cheap lanyards, inflated egos wrapped in blazers and soft cologne. I stood near the back, stirring cream into a paper cup like it was a ritual that might center me. The stage lights flared hot against a dark velvet backdrop, illuminating the panel table where 5 speakers were preparing to talk about tech disruption in legacy industries. And then as she walked out, Rachel, my ex-wife, her name hit my brain slower than my eyes registered her. Same walk, same nervous tuck of hair behind one ear, same faint freckle on her collarbone that always surfaced in early spring. She didn't see me, not at first. She reached for the mic with a trembling hand, tucked her notes under her elbow, and looked out at the crowd. That's when her gaze landed on me. A second of silence. Her face didn't break, but her posture did. Her shoulders rose, barely, and I could tell she'd stopped breathing. Her lips parted like she was about to say something, but instead, she swallowed it down. Then came the slip. Her greeting to the audience faltered, the practiced intro stuttering in her throat. She blinked twice, forced a smile, and powered through. No one else noticed, but I did. Because I'd seen that exact look before, years ago, when she told me she needed space, standing in our kitchen gripping a coffee mug like a life preserver. I stood there, utterly still, as the room spun around me. She was the reason I'd left my last job, the reason I hadn't dated seriously since, the reason I'd stopped believing people said what they meant. And now she was here, 5 feet above the floor, 10 feet away from me, framed by a spotlight like some divine punishment I'd never earned. I didn't move for the entire panel. I barely blinked. When the session ended, she left the stage quickly, heels clicking against the hard wood like a countdown. I didn't try to follow. I couldn't even will my body to sit down. The rest of the crowd applauded politely, oblivious. But for me, it was like someone had just reached into my chest and twisted something raw and unfinished. I took my coffee, untouched now, and walked outside. The Denver air hit sharp and cold. I leaned against a concrete pillar and tried to catch my breath. Rachel, after 5 years of silence, 5 years of secondhand rumors and avoided social circles, she was back in my world. And I had no idea what to do about it. What would you do? If the one person who tore you open just reappeared, would you run? Confront? Pretend you didn't see her? Because I did none of those. I just stood there. And part of me, some weak, aching part, hoped she'd come find me. I hadn't slept. Not really. After seeing her up there, after that jolt in the ballroom, I went through the motions. I shook hands, smiled when appropriate, listened to keynotes like my brain was somewhere nearby, but not inside me. By the time lunch rolled around, I was starving but nauseous. You ever feel that strange hunger where your stomach growls, but tightens the second you try to eat? That was me, plastic plate in hand, waiting in a buffet line that snaked past trays of lukewarm chicken and quinoa salad. Then I heard her voice. Soft, careful. Brian, can we talk? I didn't turn right away. I couldn't. But I felt it, her presence. Rachel, standing just behind me in line, closer than polite, but not quite inappropriate. I took a breath. My throat went dry. She could have emailed, called, left it to fate or time or anything else. But no, she chose now. I turned slowly. There she was. Her hair was longer than I remembered. The color darker. She wore a navy blazer, simple jewelry, no ring. Her face was exactly the same and completely different. Older maybe, more tired around the eyes, but still undeniably Rachel. And in that moment, I hated how much my body remembered her. The way her voice curled around my name. The way she tilted her head slightly when she was unsure of something. The smell of her perfume, sandalwood and orange blossom, still clinging to her skin like a ghost I thought I'd exorcised. She looked nervous. Her hands fidgeted with a cocktail napkin, twisting it around her fingers like a teenager waiting for bad news. "Please," she said. "Just a few minutes. Somewhere quiet." I looked at her too long. Then I nodded. Not because I wanted to. Not because I was strong enough to confront her. But because I couldn't bear to be the man who turned away. We moved through the buffet line like actors reading from an old, unfinished script. I grabbed food I wouldn't touch. She picked at a dry roll. No one else noticed. No one knew. But I felt like the ground beneath me had shifted. You ever stand next to someone who used to know every inch of you, every habit, every fear, and realize you're strangers now? That's what it felt like. We weren't us anymore. But we weren't nothing, either. She didn't push for conversation right there. She respected that much. But as we found two empty chairs at the edge of the dining area, her hand brushed mine for just a second. I didn't flinch. But I didn't grab it either. We sat down. Plastic cutlery clinked quietly. The room buzzed with chatter, the sound of industry and ambition. And yet here we were, two ghosts picking through a salad neither of us wanted. "I wasn't expecting to see you here," she said finally, eyes on her plate. I forced a smile. "Yeah, funny how fate works." She looked up. Her eyes searched mine like they used to, looking for warmth, for something soft. I didn't give her that. She reached for her water glass, took a sip, then set it down with a shaky hand. "I don't want to cause you pain, Brian. I really don't." I nodded once, curt, bit late for that. Silence. Not angry. Just heavy. She sighed. Still blunt. "Still, you." That made me look at her. Just for a second. I wanted to ask 100 things. Why now? What do you want from me? Why does this still hurt after all this time? But instead, I said nothing. I picked up my fork. I stared at the lettuce. I tried to breathe. And she waited patiently. Like she'd been rehearsing this moment too. Like we both knew this wasn't the real conversation. That came next. The hotel cafe smelled like burnt espresso and stale regret. I stared down into a chipped porcelain cup that held more bitterness than caffeine, stirring a teaspoon of sugar I wasn't going to taste. Rachel sat across from me, fingers wrapped tight around her mug, like it might anchor her to the moment. It was early, too early for anything heavy. The sun outside hadn't fully committed yet, still hiding behind gray clouds, casting long, tired shadows across the marble floor. But her voice? Steady. "I married him," she said. Just like that. No build-up. No apology tucked in beforehand. She didn't say his name, but she didn't need to. I knew who she meant. Jason. The colleague. The one she left me for. I didn't flinch. Not outwardly. I took a slow sip from my cup, even though the coffee had gone lukewarm. My hands didn't shake. My face didn't fall. But inside, something curled into a tight knot behind my ribs. Rachel waited. I think she was hoping I'd ask something. Maybe how long? Or was it serious? But I just looked at her. Quiet. Her eyes were glassy, but her jaw clenched like she'd practiced this, like she needed to get it all out before she lost her nerve. We lasted 2 years. Almost to the day. She gave a dry little laugh. How's that for poetic justice? I didn't laugh. The table between us felt wider than it was. I remembered when she used to run her toe against mine under restaurant tables, back when we were still something soft. Now? She looked like someone telling a stranger about a distant relative's funeral. He wasn't what I thought, she said, barely above a whisper. Too much flash, not enough soul. I raised an eyebrow. And you figured that out after the wedding vows? The words slipped out sharper than I meant. I regretted them the second they landed. She didn't snap back. She just nodded, slow. I deserve that. She kept her gaze down, tracing the rim of her cup with a thumbnail. At first, it felt like escape. Like I could rewrite everything, start fresh. But eventually, it stopped feeling like freedom and started feeling like punishment. I sat back in my chair, arms crossed. My throat tightened, but I didn't let it show. I'd fantasized about this exact moment before, her coming back, confessing she'd made a mistake, unraveling in front of me. But sitting here now, it didn't feel like vindication. It just felt sad. "You don't owe me the post-mortem," I said quietly. She looked up. I think I do. I let that hang in the air. She leaned forward, elbows on the table, hands clasped. Brian, it fell apart because it was built on a lie. I was trying to fix something in myself by wrecking what we had. And the worst part is, I don't even know if I believed I deserved happiness back then. I swallowed hard. I didn't know what to feel. Part of me wanted to tell her to stop, tell her it didn't matter anymore, that we were ancient history, fossils under conference carpeting. But another part, some bruised, spineless part, just wanted to keep listening. She exhaled deeply. I thought leaving would make me feel stronger, but it didn't. And now I wonder if I left because I was scared you'd stop loving me first. That one hit me, not because it was true, but because I had once feared the exact opposite. I looked out the cafe window. Cars passed, indifferent. People carried coffee and laptops and name badges, untouched by the small, slow wreckage happening at our table. You ever think, I said slowly, that we both gave up too early? Rachel didn't answer, but her silence said enough. We'd moved to the courtyard by then. Small metal chairs, too close together under a thin hotel tree trying its best to grow in concrete. She sat across from me again, feet tucked under the chair, arms crossed tightly like she was holding herself in place. The late afternoon light cut across her face, turning the lines near her eyes into tiny maps. I should have left. I should have said, thanks for the closure, and walked back into the conference like a man with dignity. But instead, I waited. And then she said it. There was someone else, Rachel whispered. I blinked. Once. Twice. I thought she meant Jason, the coworker she left me for, the marriage that imploded in 2 years. But no. Her fingers twisted the fabric of her sleeve, knuckles pale. While I was with Jason, she continued, I started seeing someone else at the firm. It wasn't planned. She broke off, staring at the brick wall like it might explain things for her. I felt the world tilt, not because of the confession, but because something in me didn't feel surprised. How long? I asked, my voice flat. She hesitated. 5 months. Maybe 6. Depends where you start counting. I nodded once, a mechanical gesture. And before Jason? I said, though part of me didn't want the answer. She looked at me then. Really looked. And I saw it. The guilt that had been simmering just below her polished surface. I kissed him, she admitted, voice shaking. Before I ever left you. Once. Maybe twice. I was already gone in my head, but I wasn't brave enough to say it. The words hit like rain on stone, quiet, but constant. I opened my mouth to speak. Nothing came. I wasn't angry, not in the way I thought I'd be. I wasn't even hurt, not in a fresh, sharp way. I just felt hollow. I was spiraling, she said, wiping under her eye without letting the tear fall. Everything felt wrong, and I didn't know how to fix it. I needed someone to pull me back. I stared at her. So you blew up your life. She nodded, slowly, because you never fought for me. That one landed deep. I leaned back, trying to absorb the weight of it. My lips parted, instinctively ready to defend myself. But no words came, because deep down, I remembered how quiet I'd gone. How, after she said she needed space, I just let the silence stretch. I told myself it was noble, that I was giving her room. But maybe it was just easier than begging. I swallowed hard. You wanted me to chase you. I wanted you to want to chase me. I dropped my gaze. We sat there, 2 ruined people picking through the debris of who we used to be. She exhaled, slow and shaky. I didn't say this to punish you. I need you to know. I need someone to see it all, not just the version that's easy to explain. I looked up at her, and for the first time, I saw the full picture. Not the woman who left me, but the woman who was lost long before she ever walked away. I didn't forgive her. Not then. Maybe not ever. But I didn't walk away, either. I just sat there, stunned into stillness, with a heart too heavy to lift and a past too loud to ignore. That night, the city breathed around us in silence. The rooftop bar wasn't crowded, just a few tired professionals nursing overpriced drinks, their laughter low, distant. Denver lights flickered like tiny stars trapped beneath glass, and the mountains beyond were nothing but shadows. We didn't talk much at first. Rachel sat beside me, legs crossed, holding her wine glass in both hands like a prayer. I watched the red swirl gently with each breeze, catching little glints from the overhead string lights. I hadn't planned to be here. I should have gone back to my room, turned on the TV, stared at the ceiling. But she'd texted me, just a location and a question mark. And I'd come. I don't know what that says about me. Maybe I wanted closure. Maybe I just couldn't resist the pull of the familiar. She was quiet for a long time. Then she said it, soft, almost embarrassed. I used to check your LinkedIn. I blinked. What? She smiled, sheepish. After everything. I told myself I wouldn't, but I did. Every few months. Sometimes more. Just checking. For what? Her eyes didn't leave her glass. Signs you were happy. That you'd moved on. I don't know. I let out a breath, slow and deep. That small confession did something to me. Not anger. Not satisfaction. Something quieter, like a thread pulling loose in the dark. I figured you blocked me, I said. I tried, she admitted. But I always found a way around it. She looked at me then. Really looked. Her eyes weren't asking for pity. They were asking for understanding. I kept expecting you to look successful. Settled. Maybe remarried. Something polished. But you didn't post much. You just faded. I swirled the wine in my glass, letting the silence stretch before answering. That's kind of what I did. She nodded, like she'd known it all along. I thought leaving would unstick everything, she whispered. That if I cut the cord, I'd be free to find whatever it was I thought I was missing. She sipped her wine, then added, but when I didn't see happiness in your updates, I started to wonder if maybe I hadn't just broken you. I'd broken something in myself, too. The words hung there between us. Not cruel, not blaming, just true. I leaned back against the patio railing, letting the cold metal press through my shirt. You ever sit beside someone who once made your world feel bright, and now it's all shadows and stillness between you? It didn't feel romantic. It didn't feel angry. It felt human, like two survivors catching their breath. Do you ever regret it? I asked, before I could stop myself. Rachel didn't look away. All the time. But not just because of what I lost. Because I don't think I ever understood what I had. I turned to her. She was older now. So was I. And in that moment, I realized I wasn't waiting for her apology anymore. I was waiting to understand what all of it had done to me. And maybe, just maybe, I was starting to. The wind picked up on the rooftop. We stayed seated. No music. No audience. Just the clink of ice in someone else's glass and the distant hum of traffic below. I don't know what made me speak next. Maybe the wine loosened something. Or maybe it was the way Rachel sat, quiet, expectant, like she was finally listening without a defense in place. Since you left, I said, I haven't been much of anything. She turned slightly, her eyes searching mine. I mean, I work. I do fine. My name's still on the door. I get emails. People say nice job when I hit a deadline. I pay bills. I make coffee. I exist. My voice surprised me. It was steady, calm, but it didn't sound like me. It sounded like someone describing a stranger's routine. I haven't dated. Not seriously. Haven't brought anyone home. Haven't really wanted to. Rachel said nothing. I thought time would fix it, I continued. That I'd feel the fire again. But it's like, I've been crawling through days. No highs, no lows. Just flatline. I glanced down at my hands, scarless, clean, older. The hardest part wasn't losing you. It was realizing how much of myself disappeared with you. She reached across the table then. Gently, slowly. Her fingers brushed mine, tentative, unsure if she had the right. I didn't pull away. She laced her hand with mine, and it was strange how familiar it felt. Like a song I hadn't heard in years but somehow still knew the lyrics to. I think, she said, voice barely above the wind, I broke something I didn't know how to fix. I looked up. Her eyes were full. Not dramatic. Not staged. Just real. I didn't leave because I stopped loving you, she whispered. I left because I didn't know how to love myself and stay. The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It wasn't painful. It was honest. We sat there, hand in hand, with the city buzzing quietly beneath us. Not together. Not apart. Just two people, finally telling the truth. The panel wasn't anything special. A post-dinner session, half-full room, lukewarm coffee in cardboard cups, and enough jargon to put the front row to sleep. I almost skipped it, but I saw her name on the program again. And still, I sat in the back, same as before. Same seat, probably, watching her take the stage. This time, she didn't hesitate. No stutter. No slip. She looked composed, like someone who'd finally stopped running from ghosts. She wore a charcoal blazer, simple heels, hair pinned back the way she used to do before job interviews. If I didn't know her, I'd think she had it all together. There were 5 panelists total. Rachel sat on the far left, beside a man who looked like he sold crypto and mispronounced synergy for sport. The discussion circled the same tired buzzwords: innovation, pivoting, thought leadership. I tuned most of it out, until someone on the far end mentioned a project I'd worked on years ago. But that model's outdated, he said, smug. I mean, it failed to scale because it was too idealistic, classic mistake. I blinked. He was talking about my proposal. A system I'd poured 6 months into. One that never got greenlit, sure, but not because it was weak. Because it was too strong for the budget they were afraid to expand. I felt the flush start in my neck, slow and creeping. Then Rachel spoke. Actually, she said, cool but firm, that model wasn't the failure. The failure was the leadership that didn't understand what they had. The room quieted a little. Even the moderator turned. Rachel went on. I was in the room when that project was pitched. It had long-term integrity, sustainability, and risk buffers built in. It was the kind of proposal that scared short-term thinkers. But if we'd had the guts to follow it, we'd be 2 years ahead right now. She didn't say my name. She didn't need to. I stared at her, stunned. For 5 years, we hadn't spoken. For 5 years, I wondered if she looked back on what I did with contempt, or worse, indifference. But here she was, in front of colleagues, peers, strangers, defending the very thing that had once defined me. My throat tightened. I didn't know what to feel. Gratitude? Closure? A flicker of pride I hadn't felt in years? All I knew was that something inside me shifted. Not healed. Not yet. But moved. When the panel ended, people clapped politely. Rachel gathered her notes, stood, and looked across the room. Her eyes found mine. She didn't smile, but she nodded. Just once. And somehow, that one nod carried everything we hadn't said aloud. I wasn't looking for her. I'd come down to the lobby to grab a bottle of water. Couldn't sleep. Too much noise in my head, her words from the panel still echoing in that quiet way praised as when it's rare. The place was nearly empty. Midnight glow from polished floors, elevator dings like slow pulses in a hospital. Then I heard her voice. Not the soft, careful version from the rooftop. This was sharper. Clipped. Familiar in a way that made my skin tighten. I stepped around the corner near the empty concierge desk and froze. Rachel stood near the side entrance, facing a man I recognized immediately. Jason. The one she'd left me for. The man she'd married after me. His hands were raised slightly, defensive. Hers were balled into fists at her sides. I couldn't hear everything, not clearly, but I caught just enough. I told you I'm done, she hissed. I'm not doing this anymore. His voice was lower, trying to keep her contained. You can't just walk away, Ratch. This affects the whole team. You made commitments. I made mistakes, she snapped, stepping in close. Including you. Especially you. He laughed sharp, cruel. You think you're better than me now? What? One panel and suddenly you're reborn. Rachel didn't flinch. I've been watching you bury people's ideas for years. Brian was just the first. My stomach dropped. She said my name. Out loud. Jason scoffed. This about him? After all this time? She stepped back, voice trembling but resolute. It's about me. And I'm done watching men like you pretend to be kings while feeding off other people's brilliance. He said something after that, but I didn't hear it, because my heart was pounding in my ears. I had no right to be standing there, eavesdropping on an argument that wasn't mine. But I couldn't move. Then he reached for her arm. Not rough. Just possessive. Rachel pulled away fast. Don't, she warned. Not anymore. That's when I stepped into view. She saw me first. Her face drained, but she didn't look away. Jason turned, eyes narrowing. Well, speak of the devil. I didn't say a word. Just looked at him. Looked at her. And something I didn't expect bubbled up. Not jealousy. Not rage. Just hurt. Old and raw, like it never really healed. Rachel straightened her posture. I was just leaving, she said to him. Then to me, quieter. I was going to tell you. I nodded once, too slowly. Then I walked past them both, bottle of water in hand, like none of it mattered. But in my chest, something split again. Because knowing she'd once chosen him, and seeing how that still entangled them, cut deeper than I thought possible. Even now, even after everything. The next evening, she sent a text. Just 2 words. Conference lounge? I hesitated. Part of me wanted to ignore it. Let that moment in the lobby be our last. Let the sting settle without reopening it again. But a deeper part, that same soft part one hated in myself, still needed to hear what she had to say. So I went. The lounge was quiet, dimly lit, music low, the kind of place where people pretend to wind down while still wearing name tags. I spotted her near the corner, tucked into a booth, half a glass of wine already in front of her. She stood when she saw me, like she didn't know if I'd stay. I sat without a word. For a long moment, we didn't speak. Just looked at each other like we were trying to remember something that used to be easy. Finally, she said, I quit. I raised an eyebrow. Jason's firm. I gave notice this morning. She looked down at her glass. I should have done it years ago. Not because of him. Not even because of what happened with us. Because every time I stayed, I became someone I didn't recognize. I said nothing. Just let her fill the silence. I hurt you, she whispered. And not just by leaving. I hurt you by making you feel like you weren't worth fighting for. And I've hated myself for that more than you probably think. Her voice cracked. You were the only one who ever saw me whole. Not useful. Not charming. Not impressive. Whole. And I threw that away because I didn't know how to carry it. I stared at the rim of my glass, throat tight. She reached across the table, palm open, not forcing, not pleading, just offering. I'm sorry, Brian. For the lies. For the silence. For not seeing what I had until it was long gone. Her eyes shone, but she didn't cry. Not really. Just held that gaze, like the apology had to live in her look, not just her words. I wanted to say something. Anything. But all I managed was a nod. Because truth is, I didn't know what forgiveness looked like anymore. Not with her. Not with myself. We sat there for a while. No more words. No touching. Just two people sharing the same space without knowing what to do with it. She watched me, waiting for something. A release. A reply. A line she could carry with her when she left. But I didn't have it. Not then. The truth is, forgiveness isn't a door you walk through. It's a hallway, long, dimly lit, full of echoes. I looked at her, at this woman who once wore my name, my hopes, my future, and I saw all the versions of her layered like glass. The girl who used to fall asleep on my chest during thunderstorms, the stranger who whispered goodbye without saying it, the woman now sitting across from me asking to be seen again. But could I? Could I look at her without remembering the ache? The nights I stared at my phone, willing her name to light the screen? The mornings I shaved in silence because no one asked how I slept? She said she was sorry, and I believed her. But belief and forgiveness aren't the same. Thank you, I said finally, the words landing heavier than I expected. She nodded slowly, lips pressed tight. I took a breath, held it too long, and exhaled hard. I don't know what you want from me, Rachel. I don't want anything, she said. I soughed. Not now. Not anymore. Then why? She looked away, toward the low amber light glowing above the bar. Because you mattered, she said. And I needed you to know that, even if I never get another chance to prove it. I looked down at my hands, still calm. No shaking. No rage. Just quiet. I'm not the same man, I said. I know, she whispered. That's why I came. There it was. The last piece. She wasn't here to reopen anything. She was here to lay it down. And me? I wasn't ready to lift it again. Not yet. Maybe never. So I gave her a nod. Not cold. Not warm. Just final. She stood slowly, eyes lingering on me like she wanted to memorize the version of me sitting there. Then she walked away. And I stayed seated, staring into the amber pool of my untouched drink, wondering how something so simple could weigh so much. Forgiveness, I realized, doesn't always come as a word. Sometimes, it's silence. She texted me her flight time. Didn't ask me to see her off. Didn't assume I would. But I went anyway. I stood outside the hotel just past dawn, coffee in one hand, the other shoved deep in my coat pocket. The cold stung in that subtle, early morning way, like the city wasn't quite awake enough to be cruel yet. She stepped out of the lobby, suitcase rolling behind her. Muted gray coat, scarf knotted neatly under her chin, hair swept back the way she used to wear it when she needed courage. When she saw me, she stopped. Her eyes flicked from the sidewalk to my face, unsure. I didn't smile, but I didn't look away either. She stepped close, the wheels of her suitcase clicking once, then silenced. I wasn't sure you'd come, she said quietly. I wasn't either. A cab pulled up. The driver popped the trunk without a word. She didn't move. I meant what I said last night, she whispered. I know. She reached into her pocket, pulled out a boarding pass, glanced down at it like she needed to remember what she was doing. Then she looked up at me again, eyes already glassy. I ruined the best thing I ever had, she said, voice breaking. And I think I knew it even when I did it. I just couldn't stop. I didn't answer. There was nothing left to say. She stepped forward, not dramatic, not rushed, just close enough. Her hand brushed my arm, then my cheek. And she kissed me there. Soft, familiar, final. When she pulled back, her lips trembled. You were the good one, Brian. The cabbie cleared his throat. She nodded at him, then at me, slowly, and turned. I watched her walk away again, not in anger, not in confusion, but with the kind of weight that only comes from knowing this was truly the end. She placed the suitcase in the trunk herself, climbed into the back seat, and the cab pulled out into the pale orange light of morning. I didn't move, just stood there, gripping my coffee until the cup bent in my hand. And then, for the first time in a very long time, I cried. Not loud, not ugly, but quiet, slow tears that cut clean lines down my face. You spend so long thinking strength means holding it together, not flinching, not cracking. But sometimes the real strength is in letting go. I let her go. Again. And maybe this time, I finally meant to. I stood on that sidewalk until the sun fully broke the horizon, warming the tips of the buildings and the tops of trees that hadn't yet shaken off winter. And as I turned back toward the lobby, I didn't feel better, but I did feel something else. Lighter. Like grief had stopped being a place I lived in and started being something I carried. Manageable. Honest. Real. She had called me the good one. Maybe once, I would have fought that. Denied it. Pushed back. But standing there, alone in the morning light, I finally believed it. Maybe I was the good one. And maybe being good doesn't mean being unbroken. Maybe it just means refusing to become someone else's damage. So, to the woman who once saw all of me, thank you. And goodbye. If you've ever stood in a place like that, if you've ever let someone walk away and still felt something close to peace, then you know what I mean. My name is Brian, and that was the day I finally let go. If this story hits something deep, leave a comment. Tell me what you would have done. And if you've ever let someone walk away like I did, hit subscribe. There's more to tell.